what I've seen in my group is that the women speak out a lot more frequently than the men. Occasionally, someone will say, where are all the men? The men will timidly pop up and say, I'm an empath. I'm listening to everything everyone's saying, but I was so, hurt as a child. I was shamed. Boys are called crybabies. If they don't like sports teams, they're put down. They're bullied in the schoolyard. They just have a really hard time of it. And they carry that with them. And so it's harder to speak up. Are there more women empaths than men? It seems like it, but not when they start to speak up. I mean, men are sensitive beings. I think the next paradigm of how to be a man is to be sensitive and strong and not have that be an issue, like you're weak if you're an empath. No, I'm an empath and I'm strong.
That was Dr. Judith Orloff, UCLA psychiatrist, bestselling author. She's been called the Godmother of the Empath Movement. Her recent book, The Genius of Empathy, which, by the way, has a foreword by the Dalai Lama, probably the best kind of foreword you could ever get. And it shows us how to transform sensitivity from survival mode into strength. We'll be talking about that today as well. And her newest book, which comes out October 7th, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, is going to be is a wonderful children's book. Judith and I talked about it a little bit before this episode, and it follows a girl named Aurora who learns how to overcome her shame. Oh, there it is right there. Really cool. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see it. If you're listening to it, you can imagine a rabbit in a desert looking up at a moon, a crescent moon. And it talks about how she learns to overcome her shame of being overly sensitive and embrace her gifts. And that's something you can pre-order now. Judith, welcome to the Emotional Longevity Podcast.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
So let's start here. For someone who's listening right now, who's been told their whole life that they're too sensitive, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know that's not true. That sensitivity is a gift. And many people are born with it. Sometimes people develop it as they go through a difficult childhood or have some kind of trauma, but not always. And empathy, the way I'm teaching it, is important to every bit of our being, our emotional, our physical, our spiritual. To develop the heart, to develop empathy is very important. But you also must develop boundaries and practice self-care and know when to say no when your energy is just exhausted. And so empathy without those kind of constraints can be difficult and not as positive as you would want it to be. So you must have empathy plus learn the boundaries and self-care techniques.
What's the danger of having empathy without those boundaries and self-care techniques?
I get so many emails and phone calls over the years from empaths who are saying, I am so exhausted all the time watching the news and the world and my family and my job, and my heart goes out to everyone and I want to help everyone, and I'm so exhausted I can't get out of bed. What should I do? That's typically it. Or I've been through the mental health system and they've been giving me every medication in the book and it's not really working. So what do I do? And so that's the beginning of the empath path, to be able to say, this is what I'm experiencing, and I'm open to whatever you have in terms of suggestions. And so that's the beginning of the empath path, and the beginning of learning self-care, of learning to release the shame that many empaths have felt in childhood. Like I was called, you're overly sensitive, you don't have a thick enough skin, what's wrong with you? And so I felt I didn't belong in the world. And I was an only child. And, as Aurora in the children's book, I looked up at the moon a lot. And I went to trees and I put my hands on trees and I felt they were my companions. I really did. They helped get me through my childhood. And that's common among many empaths, is that they don't get the adult support or adult understanding, then they turn to nature. And this is a wonderful thing. It saves children and also adults. Part of nurturing yourself as an empath is being out in nature and connecting to life, all of life. Empaths connect to the life force. And all of the animals and the flowers and the foliage and the sky and the moon phases. And, they love all of this, but they might not have been exposed to, how to go out in it, how to build my energy when I'm so tired. How do I go out in nature and let it help me? Or how do I meditate? Meditation is a key practice in learning how to be a healthy empath. And so in the Genius of Empathy, I talk about all these practices that you can do on a daily basis in order to enjoy your empathy, in order to feel the joys of connection that empathy can bring you. It helps me connect to you more so that I could feel you and I could, be able to connect as opposed to just being in my head and dealing with you from an intellectual point of view. That's more like far away. But the boundaries, being able to sense boundaries, being able to read energy is another technique I talk about in the Genius of Empathy. And so it's about developing these skills that resonate with you so you can let your empathy shine.
I hear a lot of people say that, they just kind of roll over that awareness, meaning like they don't know that moment that they're starting to get flooded maybe, or they're taking in the energy that's there, and they just keep saying yes. They keep going. So how do you help people understand that moment that becomes kind of a breaking point for them, because they are naturally an empath?
Yes. Well, the moment, that's ideal to pick up the moment when you go over the red line, when your body says no. You have to listen to your body. Your body says, no, I'm not happy here. This is not where I want to go. But you have to be sensitive to the body feeling off. And sometimes that could be a tight stomach. It can be feeling like you're exhausted all of a sudden in a conversation and you wonder what's going on, or, you think you're getting the flu, or you're just off in some way. And then suddenly things seem to be coming at you so fast. Going on sensory overload, I'll speak for myself, is probably the most painful thing of being an empath, is when too much comes at me too fast. And that happens in airports. It's a very vulnerable space for me because I have loudspeakers and people and late planes and this and that. So I'm going into the bathroom a lot in the airports and meditating, in the stalls so I can keep myself centered here and enjoy it. It's kind of a fun environment. But what I notice inside myself is my head starts to swirl and too much is coming in and I'm going, whoa, like that. And too much stimuli. And so I'd like you all to be aware of when you encounter too much stimuli, because you must calm it down and lower stimulation and be creative. If you're in a hustle and bustle environment, fine, the bathroom is always there. I mean, it's not the best environment, but it's better than being out amidst all of it.
What's really funny about that is, okay, so I talked to you a little bit before we got on here about how I run this therapeutic coaching program. And one of the things that just came up about 2 months ago, there's a woman in my program who is an empath for sure. And she's highly sensitive. And we talked about how she could go into the bathroom when something's overwhelming, like in the, people, there's a party in her house, there's a lot of people there, it's overwhelming. She's being asked asked to do a lot of things, and she can go into the bathroom. So she did that. She went into the bathroom and she took a moment, took her hands and pressed them on the counter so she can feel the pressure of her hands on the counter, bringing herself back into her body. And then took a couple deep breaths, and she looked at herself in the mirror for a second. And then I think that just her nervous system began to regulate so that she could go back into the atmosphere of other people. But just to know that bathroom option is there is, a great little, a great option. Yeah. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, there is a place to go. Or else I try in airports to get in the corner seat and then put my purse in the seat next to the corner seat. So I'm creating a little bit of space between me and the other person, because another danger of being an empath is that everybody tells you their life story and they'll spot you. I'm telling you, they'll spot you. Wherever you are, you're minding your own business, but they'll sit in the seat next to the purse and they'll say, hi, how are you doing? And I'm going, no. And then they'll start saying, I'm going on a trip to visit my mother and she's just about to pass on and she's had such a terrible experience, blah, blah, blah. I have deep empathy for everybody going through that experience. But at that moment, and this is where empaths have a hard time because it's such a heart-rending experience. You want to be there, you want to listen, but no, this is my time to be quiet. I don't know this person. I need to spend my energy on people in my world. So I said something like, oh my God, that sounds, really heart-wrenching. I hope it all turns out well. So you bring an ending, you close it. You're able to say no, even when people need your help or when people, just have this long story to tell. With empaths are very nice people and they're very welcoming and, I'm friendly and I'm nice. And so they are flocked to me, basically. But I've learned for my own protection to be able to say no at times, to be able to give a little empathic, oh, I'm so sorry, and have that be enough instead of getting in these long conversations. As my empath patients do this, they want to help everybody. And it's very hard for them not to do that, to not get in the conversation because they feel, one, they're being rude. Two, they want to help. Here's this person. Did the universe bring me this person to help? And you decide that. For me, I help a lot. And at certain times, I need to be in my bubble, which is alone, even though there's lots of people around. So I just know myself well enough because I know how overloaded I get in airports. And it's not a pretty sight. Yeah. It takes me a really long time to quiet down, meditate, look up at the sky. If it's too much is coming at me too fast, I don't like that.
I heard a couple things in that response, which was really, if everyone's listening or watching right now, for those of you who are, I heard a couple things in Judith's response, which was first you acknowledged. You said something like, wow, that sounds really hard, that you empathized basically. And then you created the closing statement. And then I was wondering on the plane, whether in that moment, then you kind of turned away towards something else you were doing to kind of give a body signal maybe that you're moving into your own space now or something like that. Do you do that too?
That's always useful. The I'm not interested body language, where you cross your legs, you change the position of your chest so it's focusing the other way, so your heart isn't opening to them and sending all this gorgeous energy. Because you have to set a limit somewhere, and there's so many people who want to talk to you. I'm sure a lot of you can relate. It's a very common trait among empaths. And so I use I'm not interested, I'm not available body language. So that's really helpful. This woman that I'm thinking of was actually in the area of waiting for the plane to take off. It wasn't actually on the plane. On the plane, it's a little harder because you're closer. However, I still do it. I sometimes put things over my head, like a coat, if I have a coat, just to go under it. I don't care what people think. I really don't. So many empaths won't do these things because they're, oh my God, what are they going to think of me? Oh, I mean, like, I'm going under. I need to be there. That's all I need to know.
That reminds me of the kids sometimes that I see who have the hoodies, and they put the hoodies over their head and they take the strings and they pull them. So there's just a little hole. You can't really see their face.
That's right. I do that.
You do that sometimes? Yeah.
Absolutely. Walk to the beach. I put it on, do the thing. And
that says like, hey, I'm in my own zone right now. I'm drawing a boundary that you can visibly see. Yeah.
Right. But I want to emphasize, it's not that I don't love people, as I do. I just need to have little doses of them. If I have any control, sometimes I don't, or if I will go into a shopping, a market, and there are lots of people, like I shop at Erewhon, and there's lots of people there. And so I just stay in my own lane. I go to the food that I love and I need to get, and I don't leave any room for too much contact. because I don't want to talk there. I want to get in and out. There's too many people. I want in and out. I want my food. So my mission is clear. And I think it's important that your mission is clear whenever you go into a crowded room. And what are some of the obstacles, in this mission to complete the mission of shopping and getting beautiful food, going out and feeling great? Sometimes, though, I do run into friends there, and that's always fun for me. Yeah. So that's different.
That lights you up a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Erewhon, by the way, is a place that a lot of people, some people just go there just to socialize, like just to, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, please.
I was always curious, what do you think about the kind of nature-nurture argument around empaths? Are empaths born? Is it something that's cultivated over time, that level of sensitivity? Like where are you at with that?
That's a great question, because it's both. There's so many etiologies of what causes an empath. Some empaths are born. That's when I was going through medical school and working in OBGYN and seeing the little babies that came out. They were so different. Some babies came out just so sensitive. Their hands reach out like they're feeling the world. Others come out like little corporate CEOs. They're like ready to go. They're very active, but their hand doesn't go out. They're not perceiving the world through energy like that. So some empaths are born and some empaths aren't. I've often wondered with C-sections versus vaginal births, if the C-sections somehow create more of an empath and less of a fight to get out. Because you're lifted out. I was a C-section.
I was a C-section too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know if you thought about it at all, but you're lifted out and, with hands as opposed to biting your way out the birth canal, which is really healthy in my estimation. But it's just a different vibe. You come out with a different vibe. And children, it's good to be aware of that, what their needs are when they come out. But sometimes people can have a very dysfunctional childhood. And they can have alcoholic parents, they can have narcissistic parents, or abusive parents. And the normally nurtured baby, if you have a happy baby and a happy childhood, the mother's had heart energy and giving it to the baby. But, if you don't have that, sometimes your energy field gets worn down by the trauma. And so the sensitivity level goes up. And that can create an empath too. But I just want to say, I have an empath group on Facebook, 22,000 empaths. And the question that gets them mad every time, they have this, they see it all over. They say the only etiology of being an empath is trauma. That drives them crazy. Because they're
like that creates that sensitivity. Yeah.
Well, it does, but it's not the only thing. And some people on the internet make it sound like, oh, these empaths are making all this up. And it's really just a trauma response, like just a trauma. It's all wrong, that whole philosophy. So there are different ways of becoming an empath. And what I've seen, particularly with the pandemic, that many people who weren't empaths suddenly become more sensitive because they're so beaten down by all the stress of the world and the suffering, and they're not used to perceiving it with their hearts and with their energy. People who perceive just in their heads, and I'm not putting that down at all, they have less of a problem with exhaustion, because they're not feeling with their whole body. What interests me is feeling with my whole body, because I love life and I love to connect. However, as we're talking about it, we have to have those boundaries too. We don't have to vibe with everyone and feel that's the mistake many empaths make. You have to have clear boundaries, be okay with saying no, be okay with taking care of yourself, and not just beat yourself up and feel so guilty because you can't help every single person on the earth, because you can't.
No, nor do a lot of people want to necessarily either.
No, they want to.
They want to. They want to help everyone on. Well, you're also in the service profession. Yeah.
No, empaths all want to. They want to help everybody if they could. But I can't. I have a section. I end up the genius of empathy with that. I have this natural tendency to want to help everyone. But one thing I've realized about healing is that it's not about that. It's not any one person helping everyone. It's, us doing the best that we can and letting people stay in their own lane to heal. You can guide them. We as therapists can guide them. We can be there with them as a very bright light for them, but they've got to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah. Is gender difference with the empath versus the non-empath? Do you see that playing a role?
Well, certainly what I've seen in my group is that the women speak out a lot more frequently than the men. And then occasionally someone will say, "Where are all the men?" And the men will timidly pop up and say, I'm an empath. I'm listening to everything everyone's saying, but I was so, hurt as a child. I was shamed. Boys are called crybabies. If they don't like sports teams, they're put down. They're bullied in the schoolyard. They just have a really hard time of it. And they carry that with them. And so it's harder to speak up. Are there more women empaths than men? It seems like it, but not when they start to speak up. I mean, men are sensitive beings. I think it's the next paradigm of how to be a man is to be sensitive and strong and not have that be an issue. Like you're weak if you're an empath. No, I'm an empath and I'm strong. So yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, there's certainly more of a movement towards, well, I don't know. When you look at leadership, I mean, things kind of come and change. It depends who are. I think leaders. I guess it depends. To me, it depends on what culture or microculture are you in, and who do you look at as a leader? Because who you look up to implicitly influences you into how you think and feel and what you do. And so if you look at certain leaders in this world, you might say you might not be a man who's, leaning towards empathy, or you might be in another culture of people, subculture that does have leaders you look up to that are men. But it certainly seems like there's more now than there have been in the past.
There's a chapter on empathic leadership in The Genius of Empathy, because I really feel strongly that that's the trend we must follow, is to have empathic leaders and not to have these narcissistic leaders who are power-based. We're skewed over to the other end now, all the power-based narcissistic leaders, because they don't have hearts in the same sense that an empath would. They're not neurologically wired to feel empathy, whereas everyone else, to some degree or another, they are wired to feel empathy.
Why are boundaries so hard for empaths? Like, why is that such an obstacle, just in daily life?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
I think many empaths are trained that to be compassionate, they have to give of themselves unselfishly and to everyone, and that's what compassion means. And it really isn't, because I had to learn that compassion means towards yourself as well. It's not just the other. And so when you get used to showing your poor self compassion, I've been through so much, everybody, poor, I love you, to be able to say that to yourself, then you want to set the boundary, because you're tired, you have to take care of yourself. You're sick, you have to take care of yourself. You just want to be alone. That's the only reason you don't want to talk to people necessarily. That's fine. If you can swing it, that's fine. And to create a life that's built on compassion for yourself and to others, because if I tried to help everyone, and that's my instinct, I want to help everyone. If I tried, I probably wouldn't have any longevity as a healer.
You'd burn out, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen, I'm sure you've seen this too. So many empaths burn out, and healers, they say, I never want to see another patient again. I'm like so burned out because they let it go on too long with the lack of self-care.
Hey, taking a quick break to let you know I've got a new book coming out called Tiny Shifts. It's about how small, intentional shifts in your emotional health can transform your stress, relationships, and even your longevity. When you join the early access list, you're going to get a free sneak peek of the Tiny Shifts mini guide and weekly insights into the top tools and trends in emotional health. Just head to drelishagoldstein.com/
tiny-shifts-early. If you can't remember that, the link is also in the show notes below. Now let's get back to the episode.
Years ago, I brought this program, which was a popular program, to Los Angeles called mindfulness-based cognitive therapy. Because I grew up in like the mindfulness-based stress reduction, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy world, and people came in there, a lot of anxiety, depression, recurrent experiences like that. And just speaking to what you're speaking about, in that program, there wasn't really any explicit self-compassion taught. And I just had a conversation with Kristen Neff a few weeks ago, really about the same idea. And I just, when you're teaching a program, you can't help but just kind of put yourself in it a little bit at some point. You like go out of the bounds of the structure, if it's somebody else's program, that is, or even if it's yours. And I started teaching some self-compassion in it. And it almost seemed like there was this thirst that was there, like a puzzle piece that was missing, got kind of put in. What do you see as the link between sensitivity and anxiety and depression, or you were talking about exhaustion, chronic fatigue, like things like that?
Well, one chapter in the book is on self-empathy, which is the hardest thing to find. It's much easier for me to be empathic with you and whatever you're going through than whatever I'm going through, though that has changed. But in general, I would have conversations with other therapists saying, why is it so easy to have compassion for my patients and I can't have compassion for myself? No, it's just human. It's human nature. It's the way we were built. So we want to put more attention towards having compassion with ourselves as well. And in terms of a life without self-compassion, that could be a very painful life, because then you're beating yourself up all the time. So I know what happens up here in a lot of people's heads. They're constantly beating, and my teacher, who is a Taoist, said spiritual progress is beating yourself up a little bit less each day. That's a reasonable expectation. And so I agree with that. But to be able to stop and show yourself some compassion. This is hard. This person is ridiculously hard to deal with, and I'm suffering here. And, just talk to yourself. That's okay. You'll take a step back, deal with it later. Just don't react. Don't be triggered in this situation. And so you want to be able to identify situations that are impossible, or that you don't, if they're putting you down or shaming you when you're getting angry and you're going to start, to assert yourself in that moment. Just take a breath, take a step back. You don't want to be triggered by these people, because it could throw your emotional center off. There are all kinds of people who will trigger you in the world, all kinds of insensitive people, all kinds of people who are oblivious. They have no idea what they're doing. They're just around, there's this force walking through life, unaware of what they give off. So have compassion with yourself. I would have that as a priority, self-empathy. This was a hard day, as opposed to, you're so stupid, you couldn't figure out what you were supposed to do then. What's wrong with you? Aren't you ever going to get it? I mean, the same thing that goes around in everybody's heads at various times.
Yeah.
It's like, it's sort of a similar tape, but it keeps repeating. So you don't want to give it that license to keep repeating. And mindfulness is a beautiful way to deal with that. Just be mindful of when the tape starts playing. Say, no, sorry, not going to play it. And take a breath. Have a mantra, or, I feel empathy for myself. All is well. To have something to say to yourself when your mind is about to go crazy with round and round of the negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. So this is learning to work with the self. It's empathy as a practice. That's how I'm presenting it.
I like
empathy.
that.
Yeah, empathy is more of a practice, because it's not just something I wrote a book about. This is my life's path. So this is how I want to be, and this is how I want to develop until I make the transition elsewhere. This is a life path for me. It doesn't have to be for you, but I think it's so important. And when things are crumbling around you, and you can say, I'm an empathic person, I'm doing the best that I can, and this is a value I believe in, that will lift you up. It will light your light force, and so other people can see the light too when they're going under. It's a very positive quality. That's all I want to say, is that if you develop it in yourself, and the self-love and the self-empathy, you'll have a lot of strength or a lot of tenderness in that heart.
You kind of gave in that explanation a couple different ideas on what people to do. And sometimes I like to give people, I like prepare people for things they already know are going to be situations that are going to be situations where they're going to be cued or triggered. And sometimes it's good to create like just a short ritual. And you named kind of a few different types in some way, but I wonder what if you were to kind of create like a 2-minute go-to ritual for somebody to support them in any of those moments, like what would that be? And feel free to weave in some of the things you said. I just want to kind of have it tighten into one kind of like bottom.
There's so many. It depends what moves you. Part of listening to empathy and intuition is what moves you. I am moved by going to the ocean. And sometimes when things are really bad, I'll take a few flowers there, do some meditation, and throw the flowers into the ocean, into the waves. And to be able to let go of shame or let go of anger, that's a ritual that I love to do. And I'll just go down to the water's edge and hear the sound of the surf, which is so centering for me, and throw the beautiful flowers in the ocean and watch them get swept away, as would be my anger or my resentments, whatever I have going on. But Ram Dass was one of my heroes, and I did podcasts with him, and I've known him over the years, and he says, fear comes back in your life. Hello, old friend, to just treat I know you. And he was in therapy a lot. And I've also been in therapy a lot in my life. Since I was a teenager, I really believe in it. I love therapy. If you find the right person, so I like to have that other voice steering me in the right direction. I love help. And so I think that's important. If you love help, or you're not sure, that to give that a chance, and to go, to someone like you, to be able to be in that loving kindness vibe, and the intelligence, the combination, to be able to help patients heal. We can't do it alone, and especially if you're an empath. You can't do it alone, because it's too much to deal with. And there's so many of us out there. You're not alone. You're not alone. And to emotionally regulate, we need to learn how to do some of the techniques that we're talking about here today. And they'll help you. You'll start to feel relief from this overload if you're an empath. And then that gives you the power to use your abilities for the good. If you want to be in healthcare, if you want to be of service, if you want to be in clergy, you want to work with animals, you want to work in hospitals with children, whatever. If you can be an empath in service, and my God, it changes everything, because you're coming in with this beautiful heart, and that's the way you treat yourself. You're aiming to treat yourself well, which is enough. So it's a wonderful gift, if you want to be of service to others, and you don't want to burn out, as it's too easy. There's so much suffering around in the world, so much suffering. And if you have the inclination to want to absorb it into your body, you're not going to have much longevity. There's a kind of direct connection there. If you absorb this too much, if you can feel something in your body, if you can feel that kind of overwhelm happening in your body, that means something's actually happening in your body, which means, likely there's some imbalance physiologically that's not moving you towards health. It's moving you towards disease in some way. Your story around release, around going to the beach and putting the flowers and watching them be swept away, reminds me of when I was in my early 20s, and I was in Israel at the time, but I was traveling in Egypt, and I was in the Sinai, and I was in a place of just, I don't know, it was a place of a lot of overwhelm, and just life seemed like a lot. Maybe it was that I was there during the second Intifada, and there was bombs blowing up. Buses blowing up behind me, and there was the prime minister was assassinated that year, and I was living there, and everyone wanted everyone to come home,
But I remember sitting in front of the sea there and putting on this band called Pearl Jam, and they had this song called Release Me. And I sat there in front of the water and just listened to this song, Release Me, and imagined everything, all the stress, everything that I was feeling just being released into the water, like absorbed the water, like the water was holding it for me. It was kind of being released. And I always have that memory. It's so clear in me. And so having rituals like that, like you have, can be, I could see why that would be really powerful.
It's very powerful. And everyone who's listening, you could find your own. You see where you're drawn. That nature is a helper here. If you're drawn to nature, maybe you're not drawn to the ocean, but you're drawn to the mountains. You want to just go with the forest. You want to be with those big trees. There's a tree up in Northern California that I love. I have a picture of the tree next to my computer. Mm-hmm. It's called Methuselah. And it's the oldest tree in that particular area, which is kind of near Santa Cruz, but inland a little bit. But this Methuselah tree, just looking at it, I printed it out on my printer. It's black and white. I mean, it's like nothing, but it's powerful. Mm-hmm. To have the pictures of what can move you in those moments where you're getting thrown off and you can't bear it anymore. I look at my Methuselah tree, and she really helps.
Yeah, it brings it to mind. Can bring it to mind. I remember I used to take people on walks around, like everyone was on their phones, but we would go as a group and we would take walks in our neighborhoods. And we do a little mindfulness thing, like on the walk, and then we'd have a discussion. And one of the members reminded me that he just had this idea. He's like, why don't we, and this will sound, we'll see how this lands with anybody who's listening right now, but I would encourage you to put on a beginner's mind for a second and just like see what your experience tells you with this suggestion. But, I live in Los Angeles, so we're in a city, and you do too. And so there's trees everywhere. And so we would literally all try this out. We would find our nearest tree that's near us, and we would literally wrap our arms around it, literally be tree huggers in the moment, and just sense the connection. And typically there was some form of release that would come from that, some like good feeling from hugging a tree. It's like a real thing. Yeah, it was so your tree thing reminded me of that. Yeah.
You have to experience this for yourself. And the way to experience it is just go put your hand on a tree, close your eyes, and just breathe and see if you feel any kind of sensations in your palm, because it's a natural thing. Or you can sit. I was recently in Scotland, and we went to Cawdor Castle and then went for a walk out in the Caledonian forest, which is an ancient forest. And my people I was with, they left me alone there in the middle of nowhere with this gigantic tree. I asked them to leave me alone for a little while within yelling distance. And I sat there and meditated. There was not a sound other than nature. There was not a person. There were just other trees. And would anyone find me again if something happened? All that comes up but it was just such a precious experience for me to be in a relatively unsafe place, because it was in the middle of nowhere, and be with a tree. I have a picture of me. I'm this big, and the tree is this big. A little tiny thing next to the tree, but I had that intimate experience. So you can try it. Everyone who's listening, you hear us talking about it. We're all excited, but you could try it for yourself. If you're an intellectual person and you stay in your analytic mind and say, I don't know about this tree stuff. You could get in your inner sensitive child. Let's say you were a sensitive little boy or girl. You can shift to get back to that place instead of the academic who's like, what's this happening? I said, just do it. Just try it. Just have some fun. As fun is part of healing. You want to have some fun in all this. You want to have it be this heavy duty, experience all the time. As empaths tend to make things quite overly serious, including myself. I have that tendency if I get down that road, if I'm going down that road. But we don't want to do that. We want to have some fun and feel intuitively. That's part of being an empath, to feel the energy of people, of nature, of each other, to be able to share energy, even as we're doing this in a virtual environment, to be able to just give off good vibes. You want to be able to do that so you can send it to yourself and to others and to patients and whoever is out there that you like to send it to the world. That never depletes you, giving out good vibes. Trying to fix people will deplete you.
Yeah, in fact, it's been, there's research on that shows that kind of informal loving kindness or blessing, or as another friend of mine who's a physician, who's in an earlier interview, Amit Sood, said, this idea of he sometimes quietly in his neighborhood or across a table will bless somebody and they won't know it. I mean, of course, he's doing it in his mind. He says it's a selfish thing for him because even in some way, because he knows it's sort of healing there's something that happens. It's not a big lift. And that the compassion has been shown to have not just psychological, but physiological correlates. Now, of course, it's your definition of compassion, which says it includes yourself. It's not the kind where you're overly giving and burning yourself out.
Right. So balance, finding a balance.
That balance. Now, I think one of the risks of being an empath and not taking your work into consideration around creating balance and boundaries, and maybe even finding your own genius of empathy, just kind of living as an empath without doing that, is you might get burnt by it a little bit, and so you choose disconnection, and so disconnection then creates loneliness. And so what's the connection that you see in people sometimes who you might have seen or worked with that are living in a state of loneliness and disconnection and loneliness and are empaths?
Yeah, I think there are two questions. This idea of disconnection, I mean, I'm all for it, at certain times. I mean, sometimes
yeah, right. That's the boundary piece. That's different, right?
I want to turn on a movie. I want to lose myself in that movie, and I don't want you knocking on the door to get in. So I just want to disconnect, and until disconnecting helps me come back to myself. And I'm very visual. Just movies or anything to do with visual beauty helps me enormously. So I give myself permission to just turn off the world and disconnect. But what you're talking about with the loneliness, I don't feel lonely then. I feel perfect, at the time, because I'm decompressing.
Yeah, that's a healthy movement to take care of yourself, right?
Yeah, so it's okay at those times. You go disconnect. That's great. Because people are guilty about disconnecting. They're guilty about everything. But, it comes up. They're guilty about watching TV and not producing anything or whatever. Your body, everything is producing something when you're watching that movie. Don't worry about it. You're doing the right thing. So I love encouraging people to do things that are good for them. Let's put it that way. But in terms of loneliness, if you feel overwhelmed and your family is too much, your work is too much, you're trying to do these techniques of centering yourself, it's not really working. So you just want to be by yourself. You just want to stay in your house. I know a lot of, maybe not so much a lot, but some empaths are housebound and they prefer to stay in their homes with their animals because the animals are much easier to get along with than humans, much easier at times. So they want to stay in their environment and not, really allow humans to come into it. It's too much. And sometimes they feel lonely and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they get used to this and this is just how they operate. But a lot of times people get isolated and lonely and they're suffering from their empath traits and they feel like failures or they feel like they have no options. And they just feel more disconnected and less human contact. And the thing is, we need human contact. Some people more than others, but we need it. That's part of being here on Earth. And, to feel, even with one person, if you have one friend, that's a good thing. You don't need to have a million friends. As an empath, I've always had just a few friends and always a best friend, because I just prefer it that way. I don't want a whole, thing. I don't want a whole big thing. And the same with my practice. I get out and I speak in front of very large groups, but I've wanted a small world. I haven't wanted this gigantic, complicated world with lots of employees and all that. It was just, that just doesn't feel good to me. But it feels good to other people, you see? So that's just me. And it's worked. My way has worked for me, over the years. It's really, I've been able to get out to a wide audience, and I've also been able to keep it small. So, because that was my goal.
Mission accomplished. Yeah.
So far, so good.
Yeah. I like how I see another, another frontier that a lot of people are speaking to, which is the importance of our future, the future that's here, which is our kids. And, this book that you have coming out, The Highly Sensitive Rabbit, you're coming to it from your own personal experience. But tell us about like how you see, like what happens to sensitive kids who don't get support?
Oh, it's very painful. Very painful. In the beginning of the story, Aurora the rabbit doesn't get support from her siblings or her parents. And they say she cries too much. She's too sensitive. She's too caring. She's not fun to be with. She's not this. She's not that. And then she begins to feel like she doesn't belong anywhere.
Mm-hmm. There's the loneliness, right?
The loneliness. And where do I belong? And I don't know what to do about this. And her well-meaning parents were worried about her. And so, all of this. And then they ended up losing their home. And her process of dealing with that, she meets other desert animals, such as the javelina, who I love javelinas, very compassionate animals, and other animals to help her learn self-care and how to take care of herself and how to connect and how to say yes and how to say no. Because in the end, the javelina says, I will sit and watch the moon with you. And she says, sometimes I like to do that. Sometimes I don't. I like to be alone. Sometimes I don't always need you there with me. So it's, about speaking up. And so that's important, because if children are shamed and then they won't develop their abilities, they'll have a feeling there's something wrong with them. And they'll walk around with their eyes down and, afraid there's something wrong with them. And there is not anything wrong with them. And as parents, you can do so much to support these abilities. And I feel so strongly about writing this children's book because, the children will inherit the earth. Mm-hmm. We need them to be in good shape. We can't have them struggling with some of the issues we've talked about today. They have to get it down a little bit earlier so they could rise up in leadership roles and have empathy and not, to deal with, the parents can help the children deal with their gifts earlier and the challenges earlier.
I think a rub that parents have sometimes is they feel like they worry maybe that this sensitivity will hurt their kids in the future, make them less resilient. Maybe. What do you say to parents who are feeling that way?
Well, that's an old idea that if you're sensitive, you're going to be weak, because I'm presenting techniques that you use to be strong and sensitive. You don't give up your sensitivities, but you can say no to somebody in need. You can take care of yourself. You can do things that are very self-loving and self-empathic. So once you learn this, once a child learns, when they get overstimulated and are tantruming, to sit and take a breath. Just sit one breath, to learn how to calm themselves down at an early age. And that will help with their overwhelm. So this can be taught at a young age. I meditated with very young children, who can sit there with their hands together like this and happy, like smiles on their faces. Like they like it. Some children won't like it that much, but you wait. You try.
Yeah, you're right. You're planting seeds, as Thich Nhat Hanh always said. Like you're planting seeds. Yeah.
Right, and they grow up. My mother meditated. I watched her go into that room and meditate, and she came out happy.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that at an early age. This is what the children, when they grow up, tell you.
My wife and I, Stephanie, always we have this story. We used to lead this program called Calm, Connecting Adolescents to Learning Mindfulness. And one time this kid came in and his mom wanted him to be there and he didn't really want to be there. And, we always said, it's up to you if you don't want to be here, but I guess this is where you're coming after school. So, and he had this kind of resistance and we had to really just hold it. It was hard. We had to hold this idea, okay, we're planting seeds. And it turned out, like when he went to college, what did he do? He started a meditation club and this same kid. And so, it was a great story for us because we both learned something from it. We said, oh yeah, that really does. You really are planting seeds and you can let go a little bit.
Letting go is a little bit is key. You don't want to be on someone. You have to meditate. You have to breathe. That will fail. You don't want to do any of that. You want to just make it attractive to them. And you have to be a little crafty, in the way you deal with it.
Yeah.
You have to tell kids, you don't have to do it, but I'm going to sit here and take a few deep breaths myself because I need it. And they'll watch you. They'll watch you, but they don't feel like they have to do it. It's a fine line because, a lot of kids are oppositional, so you don't want to force them to do anything. And sometimes you can use reverse psychology saying, oh, no, this isn't for you. You don't have to do it, but I'm going to do it. And so sometimes that works. You have to know who you're dealing with, what kind of kid.
In a world that's moving towards, let's say, it's a more empath-friendly world. But what is it in your mind? Let's say people are like integrating, you've been not doing this work for many, many years and they're integrating it. And there has been a lot of progress as a result of that. The millions of people you've impacted. But what does an empath-friendly society look like? Like, what does that actually look like in your mind?
Well, they have allowances for empaths. They value empaths and like, for instance, in the work environment, to have a meditation space where people can go and be quiet and no cell phones are allowed, where you have that refuge space. Google has that. I spoke at Google and they do have a separate space.
A lot of places started doing that. Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. To have that separate space to go and to have everyone honor that. And even have new ones try it out, to have that, or to lower the sound level, or to have dark skies, so there's not all these lights, ruining the dark sky. There's a whole movement on dark skies now where some cities, little cities like in the desert, Anzo Borrego, have dark skies where you could see the stars, you can see the heavens. And so to honor quietness, I was just in my acupuncture office yesterday, and he has a little sign saying, please do not use cell phones anywhere in this space. And so I like that. That was very helpful because I don't like hearing people talk.
Yeah.
It's very, it's intrusive. And so if we can have silent spaces, if we can have meetings that honor empathy, when someone says, I really feel like I feel passionate about this feels right to me, to listen to that, to see what happens with that, and to have compassion with people when they make mistakes. People, this is like a pet peeve of mine, where they don't know how to treat others when they make a mistake. Let's say somebody, makes a well-meaning mistake and it screws up everything. What you do is you lift the person up and try and help them. You don't put them down. You don't make them feel horrible about themselves. You have a well-meaning person who made a mistake. So that's really more of an empathic strategy. You don't want to, if they keep making the mistakes, if they keep not listening, and if it turns into that's a different scenario. But there's so many people who just are overwhelmed and make well-meaning mistakes. And I hope you can cut them a break. That's more of an empathic way of dealing with it.
Yeah, I can hear people listening right now or watching and saying like, "Wow, Judith, the way you say these things, it rolls off so easy out of your mouth, and it sounds so good. I wish I could do that. I wish I could know and say I'm passionate about this or I'm hurting about that. But in the moment, it's just so hard for me to express that. It's like almost like something's broken inside of me, and I can't actually bridge that. between where I'm at and
You know,
the expression.
that's where you start. The something is broken in me part. You know, you start with that. There's something wrong with me part. No, there isn't. And you start. Maybe you can't do all the things we're talking about. No, but you can do some of them. You can start from the beginning. The beginner's mind is great. When you feel like I can't do anything, you know, just start over again. I can't tell you how many times in my life I don't know how to deal with it. So the next morning I get on my knees and I pray and I start again. Start again from the beginner's mind, not like I know everything, but I have a very spiritual practice too, which, I reach out to something larger than myself to help me, which is very helpful for me. When I can't do it on my own, whatever it is. And so be kind to yourself. If you want to start, if you like what you're hearing in this conversation, if you're attracted to either of our energies, if you're attracted to some of this as a way of life, just, take a breath and try one thing, one thing, take a breath. Just when you start getting triggered, instead of reacting, take a breath. And then silence, 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 silence. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 beats of silence. A breath and 5 beats of silence. Just do that. That will shift you. You see, you might not be used to learning how to shift yourself when you get in these states. But if you try, as you said, 5 things, you can list, or 3 things if that's too much. 1 thing if that's too much. I don't care. 1 thing is great. I love little tiny steps, as your new book is going to talk about.
I was thinking that while you're talking, I'm like, it's a perfect tiny shift that you're talking about there. But one thing I just want to say, Jude, with what was unique about the way you just expressed that is a lot of times people say, take a deep breath, take a couple deep breaths. But you said, and I want everyone to hear this because this is important to kind of play with. You said, you take a deep breath and then you wait 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you're like actually elongating the space. You're widening the space. You're not just saying, take a deep breath. You're saying take a deep breath and sit in space for a moment, and five beats, which is doable, and that was different, and so that's something that I think when we ask where can I start, where can I begin, that's a great place to begin.
Yes, it is, and it's fun, but to use the body and the breath to help you. This is all can be very fun. It's fun to me. And I'm certainly grateful to be able to do any of these things. When you feel overwhelmed and you feel too much is coming at you too fast and you don't know, you're triggered and, it can get out of control really fast. So you want to bring it back. The skill of just bringing it back to yourself and putting it on pause, dealing with it later. Don't react in the moment. Just learning that. That's a good skill. And that's a good skill for empaths and everyone else, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Everything you talk about here is will be supportive to anybody. I usually ask people like, where can people, if someone's listening right now, what would you want to say to them or whisper in their ear? Or like, if you were to access your younger self, like what would you want to say to that sensitive girl? Kind of like what you just said is sort of that. Is there anything that you would add to that?
To a girl?
Or to anybody? I was saying to your younger self. Like, that's why I said the girl.
To say to my younger self? Oh, just that I'm so sorry I wasn't able to be there for you. I am so sorry, but now I am. So please forgive me.
Yeah. And know that I'll be there. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, she knows. Yeah. I'm not leaving her anywhere now.
Yeah.
Especially with this children's book. Now I'm more connected to her than ever. So I want to say, I'm not sure if you asked how people could reach me. Did you ask me that?
Yeah, that would be the next question. I just want to say, before you get to that, I want to say one more time, taking this work that you do and finding a way to package it to children. When I say like, what's basically the downside for someone who's a sensitive child is not getting the support they can, that like changes generations. And so, I'm really thrilled that you've created a way to do that kids can feel a sense of being seen and a sense of belonging in kind of a playful, fun way, and understanding what they can do. Yeah. Anyway, I'm very encouraged by that. But yes, how can people find you? What are you up to? I'm aware of all of our time and your time in particular, and so grateful you've spent this time with us. And yeah, tell us about that.
In October and November, I'll be on a book tour for The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. And in LA, I'll be at all kinds of stores, at Broman's in Pasadena, at Barnes & Noble in Huntington Beach, the Diesel bookstore in Brentwood, which is, kind of like my home store. And so you could just go to my website, drjudithorloff.com, if you'd like to be part of this conversation, to come to the live events, and we can talk about all this, and it's a good topic. And you could bring your children, bring anybody, no matter what age, old, young, bring everybody. And the book is The Highly Sensitive Rabbit. And the other book we were talking about, my previous book, is called The Genius of Empathy: Practical Skills to Heal Your Sensitive Self, Your Relationships, and the World. So oh, thank you. That's great. And I just want to say I've had a wonderful time with you. It's a great podcast.
All right. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for that. And I've really enjoyed our time too. And I look forward to doing it again sometime.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Bye for now. Hey, thanks for joining me on this episode of the Emotional Longevity Podcast. I hope you found it as inspiring and thought-provoking as I did. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to hit like down below, subscribe to this channel, and share it with someone you know who could benefit from these insights. Your support helps us grow this incredible community and reach more people who need it. If today's conversation resonated with you and you're ready to go deeper, if you're ready to truly integrate these ideas into your life, I'd love to invite you to join me in a beautiful, supportive community that's doing this transformative work together. It's a space where you'll find guidance, connection, and the tools you need to create lasting emotional health and resilience. Check out the links in the description below to learn more. And before you go, make sure to tune into our next episode. It's one that you won't want to miss. Until next time, take care of yourself, and remember, emotional health isn't about just feeling good. It's about building the foundation for a longer, healthier, and more joyful life. I'll see you soon.